we have Grammy-nominated engineer and producer in the studio, David Hammons. You are the first interview in the studio post-COVID. Congratulations. At this point, I don't even care if you wear a mask. I don't care if you're vaccinated. I feel good. We're good to go.
Right.
So to have you in the studio, and I know you drove all the way from Fort Payne, Alabama,
I've had my shots.
You didn't even have to tell me. I trust you. I trust you. If you're in my home, I trust you. But thank you so much.
I delivered McDonald's to Brandon this morning.
Got a little Uber fee going on there. We were just up in Fort Payne. We drove up to Chattanooga. That's a beautiful part of the country, man. And Fort Payne is a lot like Chattanooga. It's super close, but you feel like you're in a different world.
Correct. It is beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. And, of course, everyone knows that, of course, is ground zero for the greatest country band to ever come into existence in the band Alabama. And I know you've done a lot of work with them, with Cook and all those guys.
A lot of good history.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. Again, David Hammons joins us here. We'll get into your Grammy nomination. It happened, 5 years ago? 2016, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And so just to be on that short list is just amazing. You probably look at someone like, I don't know, a Michael Jackson or a Stevie Wonder who's won like 15 or 16. It's like Super Bowls. You know, if you win one Super Bowl, you've made it. And then you look at a guy like Tom Brady who's got 7, you're like, okay, there's some
Now, can we group you in with the pious gas bags up in Hollywood that get up there and tell us all how to live?
No.
Can we group in? Huh?
No. No, you can't.
You don't want to be associated?
You could, Brandon. Or, I mean, we could group you.
Well, yeah, you could.
Now, we've all seen that uncomfortable situation. Obviously, when you watch the Grammys, you want to see the stars. You want to see the people you know, right? And then we see those categories of producers and engineers and some people that we don't know, and you certainly want to give them time on stage. Now, if you would win a Grammy, you would go up on stage. Would you want to say something? Would you thank somebody? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would thank people like Jeff Cook, who gave me the opportunity to be in the studio and just work with him, and a gentleman by the name of Ed Turner, who is a great engineer. He has worked with Alabama, but he's worked with Jason Aldean, people like that. So it's the people who've formed me musically. Of course, I the spiritual side of me would be remiss not to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for getting me in that position.
And by the way, I've read up a bunch of stuff on you before. We've had you on the show a couple months ago. I love your platform. I love the fact that you are faith-based and you're a Christian, and I love that about you. And I know a lot of people, sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. I don't understand that part of it, but I'm the same way. So kudos to you, to who you are, exactly. And it's in your heart and in your soul, and I love that about you. But continue, that's great.
Yeah, and it would be Norman Blake, for sure. Norman keeps up with this stuff, but he told me that I'd recorded over 150 songs on him at the last time we got together, and numerous projects, and he is like my second father at this point, which he's like 83. Officially or unofficially, he's retired, but he usually comes out of retirement every so often and does something. So we've just had a good relationship over the years, and he would be somebody. Nancy, his wife, I would definitely thank her, my mom and dad, for giving me the inspiration and the never say no and never give up attitude. Those would be the people that I would thank.
How did you, and I got a million questions.
I'm good.
Great interviews are when you ask a question and by their answer, you have 15 more questions, which is what you're going to do for me all morning long. So this is a treat for me. So for people who are listening and they think this is, I don't understand this, I don't care.
Exactly.
I'm going to enjoy this interview. Tell me how you got started in engineering, because it seems like a lot of, say, athletes, they play the game, then they want to manage. Was it a situation where you were a player at one point and then you decided to engineer? Do you have engineers and producers who never played an instrument that just have an ear for that kind of thing? How does that work?
Well, that's true. But my start was I was on one side of the glass in the studio as a musician. My first recording session was actually here in Birmingham at Boutwell Studios back in like 1979.
Remember it well.
Or 80.
That was the year I was born.
I cut a lot of car commercials down there.
Exactly. Tony Wachter was the engineer. Ed Boutwell.
He's still around. Tony's still
running around in there. If we needed hand claps, Ed would come in.
You get sound effects off LPs. Now we just make our own.
Yeah, so we would. That's how I started there as a musician. I sang there the first time I ever heard myself sing, and I thought I was terrible. I was just devastated. I left thinking I'm just going to quit, and but I've had to get used to hearing myself, on tape. But
and are you good?
I've been told I am. I've been told I'm really good, but I have a face for radio.
Well, you're in the right place here at KCast Radio. I got news for you. It's amazing to me how many when George Benson came out with Masquerade, it was a whole instrumental album, and someone at some point said, "Why don't you sing?" And he's like, "I can't sing." And you listen to George Benson sing, exactly. Stevie Wonder.
Right, exactly.
I mean, Stevie Wonder, he knew he had something, right? He was different. But it's amazing how, I don't want to say insecure, but singers, for the most part, Taylor Hicks is a good friend of mine. He didn't know he could sing. And this guy can knock it out of the park. He can sing Stevie Wonder. It's amazing.
And then you have guys that can't sing that sing a lot, like Bob Dylan.
Well, that is some opinion.
But Bob owned it.
Bob is a writer. He's a writer's writer.
Yes.
But Bob is so unique. I mean, he's like Willie Nelson. As soon as he opens his mouth, you know exactly who that is.
Well, and you can make an argument for Taylor Swift in that point. Stevie Nicks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you heard Stevie Nicks for the first time, you'd go, "Whoa!"
But they're recognizable.
Absolutely.
We were at a mutual friend's.
Real quick before you get into that, is that indicative of if you can write a great song, it doesn't really matter what you sound like if it's a great song, or is that in cases? Because I know a lot of people write songs, they never sing their songs. And then they send them off to other people. And I think a lot of people, everyone thinks that if you sing a song and you wrote it, in most cases that's never true. But I mean, is that indicative of because if Stevie Nicks writes a great song, it's a great song. Great singing.
Well, you have to be able to hold pitch, obviously. But
that's what they have you for.
Song,
all right.
Well,
you fixed that.
In the old days, there was no
auto-tune.
pitch correction.
Yeah.
And now you can just fix just about anything.
I could cut an album.
I could make you sound like Taylor Swift, right, Brandon?
Yes, I would.
Well, you wouldn't look like her, but
I could have her bank account, then.
and that's where it lies, because I love talking about this. You used to create the album for your money and then go on the road to promote it, and you'd play 3 or 4 songs that no one really cared about off the new album, and then you would hope you'd sell some so people listen on the radio. Now it's just the opposite. No one cares about the album or the streaming. They pay the big money to go on a concert. And I'll never forget the last time I saw Crosby, Stills, and Nash at Oakmont Amphitheater was probably about 8-9 years ago. They had a sound room off the side. It was some VIP area where they had the soundboard of just their harmony. And I was a little afraid, and this was 6-7 years ago, so this is when they were a little older. I was a little scared to see what it was going to sound like. It was killer. Mm-hmm. I mean, I enjoyed listening just to their harmony parts and no band at all, just because it was so pitch perfect. It was so great. So I think that's indicative of.
Kenny Rogers said, to answer your question about the song.
Yeah.
And he probably heard it from somebody else, but I think he even wrote a book about it. It's the song, not the singer. If it's a good song, people. They come to the studio and they want to do a full-blown demo. And I said, well, let's hear your song. So they'll play me the song, and it's like, all you need is an acoustic with that. That song is so rich in the melody. It's rich in the lyric that we just need to just let that ride. If all your purpose is you're going to send it to somebody else, you need to take all those production ideas out, your production ideas, and leave it for them to hear. But that song is so well written. You just need to leave it alone.
Yeah. Can you, David Hammons joins us here. He's a Grammy-nominated engineer and producer, and he drove all the way in for Fort Payne to be here on KCast Radio this morning, and we have him until 8:30, so I really appreciate you coming in. I saw a story the other day, Boys of Summer, the song from Don Henley that was Building the Perfect Beast song, which was one of the biggest songs he ever had, was not his song. It was written by the guitar player for Tom Petty. Bass player. He goes to Tom and goes, I got this great song. He was really off on it. And Tom's like, I don't really think that's something. And he's like, wow, I thought this was a really good song. And he's like, yeah, go do whatever you want with it. And he goes, do you mind if I pan it off on someone else and make a little money off of it? So he went to Don. Don rearranged it. And next thing you know, it was a huge hit. Does that happen a lot? Does that?
Good question. It does happen some.
Yeah.
Where people will write something for somebody and it goes elsewhere and it becomes a big hit. Yeah, it would happen, I'm sure. I've not had a lot of experience right there and that happening with anybody that I know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it happens.
And sometimes, I mean, I just, and this happens too, where an original come out, and then someone will remake that original, and it will be a huge hit, and then people will realize that's not the original. They'll go back and listen to it differently. I guess it's all in the arrangement, and that goes along your lines, right?
Dylan is one of those.
Yeah.
That people have covered his tunes, and
all on the Watchtower.
Yeah.
What's amazing also when an artist redoes, and one specific song comes to mind is the 500 Miles. I would, that song.
Mm-hmm.
So when you listen to the original, it's very campy, very fun, but there was a band that did it acoustically and slow, and it changes the entire feeling and the lyrics. When you listen to the original, you hear the lyrics, but you're not really connecting with them because the music is so up and happy. But when you listen to it slow and acoustic, it changes the entire. I mean, the lyrics are amazing, actually, to that song.
You're painting a different landscape.
Yeah,
at that point,
it just blows my mind how the same song can make you feel different. You know, when it's written differently.
Well, case in point, we're doing Soul Carnival. We're doing Easy by Lionel Richie.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was afraid to say anything because I know it's kind of like, but it's. I just can't believe. First of all, I can believe they can pull it off. I just can't wait to hear it because I know the original was huge and I know it was great the way it was sung and written. But I can't wait to see what they put on it.
It's been sold up. Let's put it that way.
I'm sure it is.
They have to obviously contact Lionel's.
They'll just have to pay the mechanical rights for it like that, and can do that fairly easily at a little website called HFA, which is the Harry Fox Agency.
Has it always been like that? I always thought it was something where you had to get.
No, it's not always been like that. And some people, you can't do it at all.
Yeah.
You have to go to their publishing company and get the rights to record those songs that way.
I know that Rick James hadn't made a damn dime off of Super Freak until MC Hammer came out with it and said, "Do you mind?" He's like, "Sure." And next thing you know, they're in a lawsuit because he's making more money than Rick made his entire career off of Can't Touch This. So, and David Hammons joins us here. He is a Grammy-nominated engineer and a producer. He's out at Fort Payne. He's worked with the band Alabama and all kinds of country stars. And we got some birthdays today. I'm going to throw out a couple birthdays. I want you to, you may not, I know you know these people, but have you had 6 points of Kevin Bacon with any of these people? So I'll throw that out in just a few minutes. So you have a person comes into your studio and they have a great song idea, and I'm sure you've heard millions. You've probably heard some songs you're like, this is horrible, and you probably heard some songs like, that's interesting. And, back in the radio days, we'd always say, you got to get that point of attention within 10 seconds. Well, there's a lot of songs where you listen to the first 10 seconds, it would never have been a hit if you didn't listen to the entire thing. This is not, it's like hook radio, right?
Right.
Because back in the 70s, we end up talking up to the post anyway, so it didn't really matter. You didn't hear that first 10 seconds. What kind of creative direction, and obviously if they're hiring you, they trust you and they know that you're a great engineer and producer, and so you're going to put your magic on it. But how often do you fight with artists, or how often do you go, listen, I think reverb would sound better in this part, or maybe change this arrangement a little bit, and how often do they go, no, I'm going to stick with what I do and this is the way it's going to be produced, just do your job? Or do they allow you to give creative impression on that stuff?
Whether they allow me to or not, I give it.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. There you go.
But I'm very tactful about it because obviously they hired me so they could fire me.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody comes in the studio and if they're not necessarily established yet, if they've only been there, working on their craft for a few years, I'll just sit them down and we'll say, when you come to see me, I want to see your lyrics in printed form, and bring whatever instrument you play, or I've got guitars here and a piano. Play me your song. I'm going to read the lyrics, and if there's lyrical problems in it, or if it could be richer, if you could just change a few words, then I'll make suggestions and work with them that way. to try to make
what
it
would be
better.
a lyrical problem? I think that's interesting. What would be the words just aren't?
Well, like syllable counts,
Yeah.
for one thing, and if they're not matched up well within the verse, if you have an A-B rhyme scheme, A-B, A-B on the lines, if it's 4 lines, if your syllable count in A line, the first one, is 14 syllables, and then your next A line is 9,
Yeah.
then there's a discrepancy, and it probably is not going to sing or flow well. Now, some people don't adhere to that theoretical form of writing, and such as you can look at Sheryl Crow's lyrics and do the syllable count thing on her lyrics, and she's everywhere on that. But she's an artist, and she can stretch a word or shrink it when she's singing it. So that's that. I'll look at their lyrics and listen to their song and see if we can make it better.
I danced with her at a wedding, at Jay Barker's wedding. She actually asked me to dance.
Can I touch you?
Yeah. She said, "Would you like to dance?" I like tall men. And I looked at my wife and I said, "Is it okay?" And she's like, "Sure, it's not like you have a shot." And
Is she Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Sheryl Crow, no.
No?
No.
She will be.
There's a petition.
Yeah.
Going back to the other day, there's a petition online to make Three Dog Night a Hall of Fame band.
I think Three Dog Night and Bad Company is one of those bands not in yet. But I mean, if Dionne Warwick's not getting in yet, Sheryl Crow's not getting in yet.
Wow, that's true.
I mean, I don't know how they pick. I mean, the fact that Bad Company's not in is a joke to me, but I think sometimes they hold them out just so they can get some talk.
Yeah, Bad Company.
It creates.
Bad Company should have already been there.
Paul Rodgers should be in for something. Just, I mean, because
Greatest vocalist of all time.
Yeah, Elton John said he's the great. He is.
Yeah.
You talk about a guy who not only sounds so distinctive, but he's fantastic, and he's done it with 3 or 4 different bands: The Firm, Free, Bad Company. I mean,
greatest vocalist that's not in the Hall of Fame, or greatest vocalist of all time?
He's going to be one of the, in my book, he's at least top 10.
Okay, because I mean the guy that comes to my head is Freddie Mercury as far as greatest vocalist.
But he's in.
He's in, obviously, but that's why I asked the one that's not in the Hall of Fame, or actually all, you know.
Mm-hmm. If you hear Paul Rodgers now, he's as good now as he was then. I don't see how he kept his voice so well. All these
and that's amazing because, I mean, you hear these guys, and when they're holding the microphone over the crowd, you know they're not hitting the high notes anymore, right? Because they want you to sing it for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I listen to Bob Seger, who still sounds as good as he did back in the 70s. Rick Emmett from Triumph. I went to rickemmett.com the other day just to see he's doing a bunch of solo. He's still he's hitting the same flipping notes he hit, you know, with Magic Power back in 1977. I'm like, how in the world is that possible when he's 70 years old? Mm-hmm. It's great.
Do you think Steve Perry ever thought that they would find someone that sounded just like him?
No, and Steve Perry's one of those guys that can't hit the notes anymore.
Yeah,
he sings all the Journey stuff an octave lower if he'd ever do it again. But yeah, I mean, the guy who, and I think that's one of the reasons that classic rock as a whole, you know, if you pull up ticket information on classic rock bands and you want to hear Journey, it's usually a tribute band. The tribute bands keep the music rolling. They sound, well, Leonard Skinner, I think, has got one surviving member in the entire band. They've never sounded better. It's because, and to make your point, I'll tell a story. I brought on Jan and Dean at the Birmingham Concert Hall back in 1989. I got their record hanging right there, Jan and Dean Surf City. And Dean signed the record, Have a Bitchin' Summer, and Dean, and I wanted to get Jan's autograph, and obviously Jan had gone through car wreck and strokes and all kinds of stuff, and he had to hold his right hand to do the. And they get up there, and it was much like Dead Man's Curve, the movie. It was like, it sounded too good. It was like these guys, and it was because they had a hell of a band behind them. Right. They had 8 guys that were getting after it. They were all in their 20s, and they could play Jan and Dean better than Jan and Dean did. But I mean, the fans loved it, and they got to see Jan and Dean, and that was the important part. So who on I'll let you go off the page if you want, even people that we don't know. Who are some of the greatest singers, and what makes a great singer for you? I think that's really interesting because I go back to, I think Stevie Wonder, to me, I know Aretha Franklin has been a top artist on everyone's list for a long period of time. It's one of the greatest singers of our time. I don't think Paul McCartney's a great singer. I didn't think John Lennon was a great singer. I think Stevie Wonder's outrageously incredible singer. I think he's wonderful. But give me some of your favorite singers and some of you think the greatest singers in our generation, and why.
That I've worked with?
Well, whether you work with or just that you enjoy, that just can just knock it off.
Oh, wow. You know, a lot of my area is going to be in country music. I think
start with some you work with, because I mean I think that.
Well, Randy Owen, is he's kind of like Paul Rogers. He's as strong now, as he was when he started his career. I think he is really good.
And I think it's interesting too, because Randy, if he was in a singing competition, I'm not sure he'd win, but his voice was perfect for the music they were creating in that genre.
Randy picks good songs.
Yeah.
He and Teddy and Jeff, they all pick really good songs. I've been privileged to be in the room when they were sitting in a circle and going through the song categories to try to find something for an album.
Yeah.
And it's really unique to watch how they do that. It has to relate to them before they're going to pick it. But Randy would be one. There is a guy that most people have never heard of up from Northeast Alabama by the name of Andrew Pope. He's a really good vocalist. He's kind of an outlaw country kind of a guy. Joe D. Messina. In her day, she was incredible. Yeah. I've got her I'm All Right album is on my flash drive, you know, and I listen to it all the time for a couple of reasons. The production in it is great. The mix is incredible. I look at that mix as one of the best mixes that I've ever heard if you listen to the whole album. Gosh, going back, Don Henley. Never worked with Don, but he can hit some really high notes. And I know because I sing in a Eagles cover band. I'm the drummer.
There you go.
So I sing a lot of his songs, and some of them are a stretch.
That's one thing that I think is amazing about both Don and Phil Collins, and the fact that you can play drums and sing at the same time. I don't see that's possible. It's just an amazing
concentration.
There's
a local band called Razzmatazz.
Oh yeah,
you know Razzmatazz?
Yeah, Henry Lavoie.
Henry plays drums and
plays Bar 31.
Yeah,
I'm seeing him Thursday night.
He sings and plays drums.
That's an amazing talent.
Yeah, he's got a rich, really cool, rich voice. Yeah. I love his voice.
So is there anyone that we would know? Like I always use Stevie Wonder, and I got into a little debate with my radio partner Josh Klapow. He's like, I don't see it. And I was like, how can you not hear Stevie Wonder and think that he's the greatest? If a guy can sing anything across genres, I think is amazing.
Well, the fact that Stevie can hit those notes without going into falsetto, to me is pretty incredible. That's the way it is with some of the Southern gospel singers, like the tenor singers in some of the Southern gospel bands. Those guys can get up there without going into their falsetto, and it's just mind-blowing to me. Anyway.
David Hammons joins us here. He's a Grammy-nominated engineer and, of course, a producer, and we're so happy to have him. And he came all the way from Fort Payne to be this morning here till 8:30. So I go back, and, of course, I've been doing classic rock. I know you do a bunch of country stuff, but you've certainly dealt with a lot of individuals. I got a couple birthdays I want to throw your way, including Pete Townsend, who I'll get into. So every producer, I'm assuming, has kind of got an engineer, has kind of got their own way of doing things, and maybe that's how people, and I think of Ted Templeton, I think of Mutt Lange, who did a lot of heavy metal stuff. He did AC/DC and Def Leppard. He did Shania Twain stuff. When someone's picking an engineer producer for their project, is that, and I read a very interesting story about Don Henley and the Eagles in that, and I forget who the engineer's name was that did all their early stuff. It wasn't that they wanted to sound mellow, it was the music they were writing, but there wasn't a production facilitation of what they were thinking the songs were going to sound like in their head. And they were coming out a little flat, whether it was not enough reverb, whether it was the instrumentation, whatever it was. And again, we're talking early 70s, so it's a lot different than it is now. And he believed that, and they didn't have a lot of success early on in their careers, which is hard to believe because all those songs that we listen to now from 72 to 76 are huge hits, but they weren't at the time. They weren't at the time, and a lot of that he believed was in the engineering and the production of those songs. So when someone finds someone, do they listen to your stuff first and go, I like the way this sounds, it's more raw, it's more produced, it's more, how does that work when you work with people?
I really don't know how they pick me out to do things. Some of it comes with the territory where I work, which would be at Cook Sound Studios in Fort Payne. So we get a lot of country and bluegrass through there. Plus, I've worked with Norman, so that's a little bit different sound than what you're going to hear on a country record. I've done rock.
Yeah.
I have done gangster rap.
No way.
Yes.
Really?
With some guys from Atlanta. That was a lot of fun. So I'm not afraid to try anything, and I experiment a lot, but I will usually go with what the artist wants unless it's just completely not good.
Yeah.
If it's a certain sound that they're looking for. And usually they figure that out after a mix or two, and they listen to it. They say, well, you were right. We need to do it this other way.
It seems like you'd almost have to be almost like a therapist. I mean, I've read enough times where bands, writing the songs, that's kind of the fun part. Certainly playing them on stage is normally the fun part, but then getting in the studio. And there's a ton of new stuff coming out this year, 2021, a lot of older rock and rollers, and a lot of them, Motley Crue, for example, they don't want to go back in the studio because they're going to kill each other. The Black Crowes, they're like, you know what, if there's a way we can piece our piece, and maybe they can virtually, they can piece it together. And I know the Doobie Brothers did it with Peter Frampton. They pieced together a song, and they all did it separately, and they threw them in the pot, and they said, here, do something with it, because they didn't want to be in the studio together. They'll kill each other.
You're exactly right about the therapist part. I have the first rule of engineering, and here's what it is, and you probably understand it, is make coffee. That's the first rule. That is
they do that rule. At AA meetings too.
It doesn't matter what time of day that the musicians are coming in, they're all going to want coffee at some point. And so you make coffee and you try to create an atmosphere that's laid back. That's what I try to do, as laid back as possible. All at the same time, I'm listening to what they're doing, and I'm making sure that they stay out of trouble, because if they get into trouble in a track, I'll have to fix it. So I know what I can fix and what I can't fix. And so my job is correct during the recording process is more of a therapist, just keep it's like driving the train, keep everybody headed in the right direction, and making sure nobody screws something up. Because I play a lot of instruments, and so I hear all the parts at the same time, and I'll know if, I can fix that later because he played the same note in the first chorus. That's the beauty of digital, so you can fix things. But you're correct. In the recording process, the day that you show up to the studio to record, I'm going to make you as comfortable, because attitude comes across on tape.
Yep. If
you're pissed that day, it's going to sound like it on a song that you shouldn't be pissed on,
Is it an enjoyable process? I could see where, and again, I play trumpet and a little piano, but I could see where to go in a studio for 8-9 hours and do the same thing over and over would not be an enjoyable process, but it's something you got to do.
Well, I work my own schedule.
Yeah.
So if I do 3 days in the studio, I need like 6 off.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Yeah.
I pinch myself and I say, I can't really believe I'm getting paid to do this. I would do this for free, except I have to pay my light bill. But it's just, I totally enjoy it.
Do the bands enjoy it?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think they do.
Yeah.
They seem to. So.
How often do you, and David Hammons joins us here, he's a Grammy-nominated engineer and producer. He came all the way from Fort Payne to be on KCast Radio this morning on the Kurre and Klapow show, and I really appreciate you coming in. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. How often do you have situations where, and again, it's hard to get all the guys in the same room, but how often do you have to piece things together? And I think of Paul McCartney's song "My Love," which I think is one of his greatest ballads. It was one take, and they're like, "Okay, we're ready for that." He's like, "That's it." Nope. And there's some points in it where his voice cracks, and it's like it's perfect. I sang it from the heart. I did it without looking at the lyrics, and I'm good. And so they let it go, and obviously it was a huge song. How often do you go back and say, let's do that again? Because you want to have that safe, I get that, but at the same time, and do you do that with every musical instrument? How do you piece it together for people that don't really understand how it works?
Most of the time we record live in the studio because we're set up so well. We have isolation rooms. It's isolated where you could fix a part if you needed to. I leave the machine running the whole time.
Yeah.
I never cut it off, because if they start playing and I miss that really good song, I have done that once. And I have regretted it. But if they start playing and everybody in the room knows at the end when you hit the last note and it fades, they say, "Oh, that was it." I mean, everybody can feel it.
Yeah.
And it's just like I'm getting chill bumps now thinking about stuff like that. But as soon as they hit that last note, and you just everybody knows, it's like, oh, that was the take. So you leave that thing running the whole time. Now, a lot of people, they have to record it to the click track. They have to have it on the grid, so that they can line everything up. I prefer the good feel of the song. But yes, to get that feel, and everybody at the end of the song knows that was the take and that's the one, then you're done. So most of the time, if within 3 takes, you're going to get that one.
Much like an athlete watching a ball game that they used to play in. And I think of A-Rod, just for example, watching Major League Baseball, because he seems like he's overly critical of a lot of things that baseball players do because he could do it better. When you listen to a song, how do you listen to it? Do you listen for the song quality? Do you straight go to the production and engineering and producing facilitation and go, that sounds a little off? Or in other words, do you listen to music the same way I do?
Probably not.
Yeah. Do you know that?
The way I listen to music, period. I try to listen to it just from an honest perspective and not being critiquing it at first.
Can you enjoy it the same way, or do you enjoy it at a deeper level?
Well, I'll give you an example of when I don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to a worship service, because I play different instruments and I can hear, that's the big thing about an engineer. You have to be able to hear your ear. You have to trust your ears. But I'll go to a worship service and you'll have 6 musicians on the stage playing stringed instruments or whatever. And if the lead player or the rhythm player over on the left side of the stage, if his 3rd string is out, I'll know it.
Yeah.
Even in all that mess.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to get myself in a mindset of I'm here to just enjoy this, and I'm not here to critique it. And so it has to do with my attitude going in to listen to something like that. But as far as listening to songs, when people bring them in to record, I'm listening for that connection that it paints a good picture.
Yeah.
It's very similar to film where I'm watching Fargo right now, and they have some scenes where, as an actor, I'm like there's a scene where it was just music and a guy coming out of a restaurant, getting into his car, doing some things, and driving off. There was no dialogue, and it was all one shot. They never cut. It followed him out, everything. I'm like, man, that was a brilliantly filmed shot, because the little integral things that they did, a normal fan would not notice and doesn't really care. But as an actor, I'm like, that took a long time because it's one camera following. I mean, the choreography has to be perfect. The extras have to come in exactly how they need to come in. Timing is everything. It's just this, I think it's parallel to how you listen to music, how I watch TV and movies. Would you describe yourself as a perfectionist? I could see where guys, and I see this just in voice guys, they'll come in, they'll want to do 16 takes. And for the most part, you want to get in and get out, right? Because you're getting paid flat fee. You don't want to be in there for an hour doing a car commercial. And I've seen, agencies go, do another take. And it drives you crazy, because I think there's that one take. You'll say, that's good. We'll hold on to that one. Let's do it again. So you probably have musical people that want to do more takes, and then probably some maybe that didn't do it as good as they possibly could. So that's good enough.
Well, But to describe myself as a perfectionist, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I guess when I go in and do a project and I mix it and I'm finished with it and the artist loves it, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I grade myself an 85.
Mm-hmm.
If I ever hit 90, then I really feel like I've accomplished something. Because if I ever hit 100, I'll probably quit, but I'll never hit 100.
Never hit 100,
I'm just never going to get there. But there's always something that I could have done better in it. And so I'm always striving for that perfect EQ setting on the kick drum, that kind of thing. or the perfect snap on the snare.
Do you give yourself a number after every recording session?
I do.
I do the same thing on our show.
Exactly.
I do this because an 85.
I don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I don't want 85s. If I can get 92, 93 is about as good as it gets for me.
I'm not sure I've ever hit 92. I've gotten to 90 a few times. And I did the last project I did for Blake. I've got his voicemail, and he sent me. He said, "Well, I've lived to this with this CD in the car and everywhere else." And he said, "I'm quote him. I'll quote him here. He said, I am deliriously happy with what we have." He said, "Do whatever you do in mastering and don't slick it up none. I like it just like it is." Okay.
I had to laugh. I was reading a story. Brian Johnson from AC/DC, who's been through a lot. We play a lot of their music here. He is coming out with a book called Brian's Life. It's an autobiographical reading. He was talking about Malcolm Young, who passed away. They were talking about being down in the Bahamas, and they were producing and engineering the Back in Black album, which when it came out, he listened to it the first time. Brian thought it was horrible, and obviously it sold 30 million copies. And there was this clicking sound during one of their songs, and they couldn't figure out what this clicking sound was. And so Malcolm had the ear for it. And he said Malcolm could have been an engineer. So they one by one started taking each part of the song out because they were playing separately, and they were taking this guitar out and this guitar out and this guitar out and then this bass drum. And they could not figure out. And he's like, "No, I still hear it." No one else could hear it. Mm-hmm. And they came to find out, and they took it all out to the drums. They found out there was a king crab inside the bass drum that was tapping up onto the skin, and he could hear that over. Now, you're talking AC/DC, right? Shoot to thrill. You're talking stuff that's in your face, but he could hear that clicking noise of that crab claw during that particular song. They took it out and redid the whole thing. Some people
can just divide all that up in their head and hear it.
All right, so I get some birthdays today.
Okay.
It's interesting because we have 4 musicians who have birthdays today. I'm going to throw the name out. Don't know if you've worked with them. If you have, expound. If you have a thought on them, let me know. Pete Townsend turned 76 today.
Most innovative dude, one of the most ever to record music. Guitar player, but he used the synthesizers and things like that to accentuate what he was doing. But a great performer. Yeah. On stage guy. I've never worked with him, but I'm a fan, huge fan.
Yeah. Phil Rudd, drummer for AC/DC, who's obviously been through a lot. He's been in prison, drug rehabilitation, everything else, but back with the band. Do you know anything about him at all?
I do not, but I do know his music, and he is a really good drummer.
Dusty Hill of ZZ Top.
Oh, wow.
Turned 72 today.
Oh, wow.
When you hear ZZ Top, I will tell you this, and I've been on their tour buses. I've got some great stories I share. Back in the old days, the 70s, it was super raw. It was Texas Roadhouse kind of music. And then they had this album, I think it was called Afterburner, where it was so synthesized and so overproduced, it lost it for me. It just was kind of like, it didn't sound like ZZ Top. It just...
talk about an innovative group.
Yeah.
ZZ Top basically wrote the book on doing music videos.
Yeah.
To begin with.
Yeah.
Man, some of that stuff is incredible. Incredible band.
You ever work with?
Big fan of the drummer.
You ever work with Waylon Jennings, Shooter Jennings? His son has a birthday today.
I've never worked with either one. Andrew Pope, the guy I mentioned before, has worked with Shooter.
Yeah.
Haven't worked with.
I think, and David Hammons joins us here, and we're super grateful to have him in the studio here, all the way from Fort Payne this morning. He drove all the way up the KCast radio studios. He's a Grammy-nominated engineer and producer. I think it's really interesting. We all try to, and artists certainly do this, and I'm sure you see this. If you're blessed enough to have a 30 or 40-year career in music, you're evolving with the times. I understand. You mentioned you've done some gangster rap stuff. I remember Rod Stewart coming out with a "Do You Think You're Sexy" album, and he was like, "What the hell are we doing?"
Yeah.
But it was disco time,
right.
And he did it, and it worked. And then he went back, and now he's doing the storytelling, stuff like that. So a lot of artists kind of evolve what's going around with them. There's a lot of artists, you mentioned Bob Dylan, they're not going to change. Well, do you kind of change with some ideas? Do you throw some different things out, or do you kind of stick with what got you there?
It depends on the artist.
Yeah.
If they're coming to me for a certain sound of what I do, we'll stick with pretty much that. I just like good music.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily trendy. Like you can listen to different areas of country music where they brought the drum machine back in, that kind of thing. And I'm cool with that if you like that for production idea. I'm all about good lyrics and good tone, good music that you can relate to. But trendy, sure, I can bend with the times if you need me to. Which just depends on the artist.
The last time you were on the show a couple months ago, you were telling me a Leon Russell story, and we really didn't get a chance to get into it too deep. I want you to share it with me again. Because it's an amazing story, how you found some Leon Russell material that I thought was just like, it blew my brain away. It was great.
It is one of those things that I was in the right place at the right time. I had been to the Grammys in L.A. We had that top 5 nomination with Norman Blake, and I flew into Colorado Springs to stay with his manager for a couple of days. I had Scott O'Malley. I had never met him in person, but had worked with him on the phone, and he sent me my check. So I flew in there for a couple of days, and we were walking around his facility. It's like 20-something thousand square feet. It's huge.
Wow.
A museum. He's got all type of artifacts in there, and literally in the warehouse section on a shelf about 30 feet away, I'm just walking through there. We're headed to the next room, and on the shelf there's 4 boxes of tape there, and by the width of them I knew they had to be audio, but they were extra large tapes. They weren't the normal small 3-4 songs all you can get on them.
Yeah.
These were extra large. And I said, Scott, what is that? He said, oh, that's the old video from Telluride. I said, okay. I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah. I said, well, you mind if I have a look at it? So I walk over and pull one of the boxes down, and on the end of the box it said 1981 Leon Russell and the Newgrass Revival live at Telluride. And I opened the box up, and immediately I noticed the number on the side of the reel, and I that is not video. And I told Scott, I said, Scott, this is not video, this is audio. And he said, oh, I thought it was video. I said, no, it's not. And I said, has anybody ever done anything with this? And he said, no. I said, so it's never been released? He said, no. Have you ever heard it? And he said, no. How long have you had it? And he said, I think he told me at that time it was like 15 years. And I said, you mean this has been sitting here on the shelf for 15 years? Yeah. And I said, well, whatever you do, don't play it. He said, why is that? I said, you'll destroy it. Because there's this phenomenon called sticky shed syndrome. These are metal back tapes. So over time, they lose they'll oxidize.
Yeah.
And when you put them on a tape machine and you start playing it, the tape head literally starts dragging the tape off of it, just cutting it off of it. And when you get finished, it looks like you shaved with an electric razor, turned around and dumped your shavings back on the tape head. That's what it looks like. It's a little bit of shards of tape. And I said, whatever you do, don't play these, you'll destroy them. And you need to have them restored. And he said, do you know how to do that? And I said, with a big smile on my face, I said, I absolutely do. He said, well, what would you charge me? I said, well, nothing. Ship them to me, and I'll do it just for the love of doing it. But if something ever comes out of it, then we'll talk about money.
Yeah.
So he shipped those things to me, and I opened the boxes, all of them. There are 4 huge tapes. And in the last box, I didn't think to look there first, but that's where the engineer, when he finishes the project, he puts the track sheet and all his info in the last box. I didn't think to look that day when I was out there. So I opened up the box, and on the track sheet, it had everybody's name. You had Sam Bush on mandolin, Leon on piano, and then you had John Cowan on bass guitar. And way down on track 19 was just this one word. It said Hartford on it. And I said, you got to be kidding, not the John Hartford? And I thought, well, maybe it's somebody else. And Hartford played banjo to the point where if you heard him, he's like a vocalist. He's recognizable.
Yeah.
So when I put I had to bake them first. You bake those things, and don't try this at home. Whoever you are, do not try this at home. You have to alter a convection oven to the point where it will maintain 120 degrees for a long period of time. So you bake those on the reel in a convection oven at 120 degrees for about 8 hours or more, and depending on the age. And so I bake those, shut the oven off, and let it cool for 24 hours. Then I pulled them out, put them on the reel-to-reel tape machine, the old Studer that we have at the studio, transferred them to digital, and then started listening. Well, the first 10 minutes was an absolute train wreck. And I thought, well, this is probably why they didn't do anything with this, because
train wreck in what aspect?
I'll explain that. Like the bass guitar cable was bad. So they unplugged it, and the whole system went bang, boom. And then they plugged the other one back in, and the whole system went boom. And the mix was terrible to begin with. Some of the instruments were not even turned up. And so it's like, there was no sound check probably. Yeah. They just started pulling up. So the first 10 minutes, I thought, well, this is why they didn't use that. They didn't do anything with it. It's so messed up. They did not have automation in that day where they could fly tracks and do things like that. But after that, then there was 2 hours worth of incredible music.
Wow. That
I was privileged enough to hear for the first time, and nobody had ever heard it since 1981.
That's amazing.
So I mixed it, sent it to Scott O'Malley for him to hear it, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And then I couldn't find any of Leon's people. Leon had passed. Trying to find somebody, there was no information on the internet.
Yeah.
So I finally was giving up on just trying to find anybody, and Scott couldn't find anybody. And of all things, I have a friend here in Birmingham at Bailey Brothers Music. Here's a shout out to Bailey Brothers Music. A guy by the name of Joseph Duro there is a guitar player, and I was in there talking to Joe and was telling him what I had going on, and I said, I just can't find any of Leon's people. He said, well, I happen to know his lead guitar player.
Oh.
And I said, really? He said, yeah, his name's Chris Simmons, and Chris played with Leon for a long time. And he said, well, I've got his cell number. I said, really? And I said, would you share? And he said, sure. He said, I'll call him. He called him, and Chris was on a tour bus headed somewhere. And he said, yeah, I know. Yeah, I've got Jan's phone number, and
jeez,
which was Leon's wife.
Yeah.
And so he said, let me call her. He called her, got me in touch with their manager, or the guy that was over the estate, and his name is Bill Siddons. Now that in music history, that's the former manager for Jim Morrison and the Doors, and handled all everything about them. So within a 48-hour period, I had sent pictures and some mix snippets to Bill, and they're currently working on a documentary that has this involved in it.
Wow.
For Leon.
What a great story, man.
Like, I just stumbled right into that one.
That's a great story.
Is that another possible Grammy nomination for you?
Well, they tell me there's like 3 categories in there that it would qualify for. So, and I'm not, I want to make sure everybody understands, I am not in this for the award.
Yeah.
Sure. I got to save a piece of music history.
Right. Yeah.
And literally those tapes were sitting in a place called Stone County, and it's a management company studio. They were going to bulldoze the building the next day, and they called Scott and said, we've got things here that you might be interested in. And so Scott goes down there, and those tapes were sitting by the back door headed to the dumpster.
Wow.
That's how close. And they bulldozed it the next day. That's how close it was to never hearing.
Do you think there's music out there that's
I'm sure
that's from people like the Beatles, Elvis, that's just sitting there rotting that nobody's ever heard?
I am told that there's some Tom Petty. Somewhere there's a guy that used to play with him that he's got tapes in his closet.
There's got to be, right?
Yeah, right?
Eddie Van Halen. I know that when they went through his 5150 studios.
Well, so everybody out there needs to know that they can be restored, and it's not that hard to do it. You just got to get it in the right hands of somebody that can do it. And there's engineers out there that can do it.
It's just, I mean, it's hard to believe because that's why I hear more than a feeling from Boston every day somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I hear that song every stinking day somewhere, whether I'm at a Walmart, in my doctor's office. I heard it at Walgreens yesterday, and it still sounds good.
They recorded it in a basement, didn't they, in somebody's house?
Yeah.
Tom's?
Tom's basement. And again, he was beyond his years, and it's got staying power, and that song will still be huge in 50 years. But you listen to stuff that was produced so long ago with what they had to use to produce. That's why people like yourself are who you are. That's why you're the best at what you do, because it's just amazing how much
I have
sound.
A passion for it.
Yeah.
I don't do it just because it's a job. I absolutely love it.
When you get into David Hammons joins the series, a Grammy-nominated producer and engineer. He works out of Fort Payne with, of course, the band Alabama and the Cook Studios, and he's been nice enough to come and spend an hour with us here on KCast Radio. When you get to producing stuff, what are your hours? Because I know passionate guys, I know songwriters, they talk about Eddie Van Halen. He wouldn't write stuff till 3 o'clock in the morning. He'd wake up with the thought in his eye, and he'd sit down and have to start to write stuff. Are you kind of that crazy dude where whenever it hits you, you just got to go with it, like an artist kind of thing? Or do you work a 9 to 5? You mentioned you work 3 days a week. If you really get into something and there's no deadline for it, is that passion going to take over for you and you just
does.
go?
And I do not understand my sleep pattern at that point. I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, I could do this with that lead guitar part right here, and I'll just, because I have all my stuff there at home too that I can mix with, I'll just get up and start mixing.
Yeah.
But as far as hours for people coming into the studio,
David's a trust fund baby. He doesn't have a 9 to
5. You know more than I do.
So who are some people that perhaps our listeners would know that you've worked with?
Oh, okay. That's Bob Hope.
Really?
Yeah.
Very short guy, right?
He's really short. He's like, I was expecting, I kept seeing him on television, and I thought he's like 6'2".
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like 5'7".
Yeah.
And, I'm looking down to him. And we actually, the group I was with back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, excuse me, we won the state of Alabama talent search. And a guy you may know from down here by the name of Jerry Ryan with 3 on a String. Jerry was the MC and was totally enamored with us, and I was totally enamored with his joke telling.
Yeah.
We won the state of Alabama talent search, which would be like Star Search or whatever now, and they flew us to Phoenix to perform, and we opened up for the Phoenix Symphony and Bob Hope. So.
Wow.
Met him backstage.
What year was this?
1980, I think.
Okay.
And met him backstage and I was shocked. He was so short. And, talked to him, very personable, got his autograph, and I didn't have a camera with me, or I would have gotten a picture or something, or there were no cell phones. So
that's something that you'll never hear in life.
I know,
again.
right?
I didn't have a camera.
I didn't have a camera.
That phrase doesn't exist anymore.
And let's stop and use the payphone.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right.
really.
That doesn't exist anymore. But he's one. William Shatner,
Wow.
another personable guy. Some of the best stories ever.
Really?
That he would tell. Oh my! We went to eat lunch, and he assumes, and he's right, that everybody knows everything there is to know about him.
Uh-huh.
So he wants to know about you. So he'll just go around the table and ask questions about you. And this is a funny story. You'll love it. So we're sitting there eating, and somebody said, ask him his age. And I think he's like 83 at the time.
Yeah.
And man, he looks really good. He said, everybody thinks I've had work done. And they said, I haven't. He said, just my genetics. And one of the guys spoke up and says, I know what it is. He said, what's that? He said, it's all those years you spent in outer space and weightlessness that's kept you young. He laughed. He said, I'm going to use that. That's really good.
You just had a birthday. We talked about it on our show. I think he just turned 90 or something. I'm like, and he's still doing Unexplained on the History Channel or something. I still watch it, and I cannot believe
he has
this dude
such a huge following.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is.
Loretta Lynn, George Jones, Old Country, Tom T. Hall. I've not worked with Chris Stapleton, but I'm a big admirer of his music.
His entire band's from Alabama, right? Like his his
Stapleton?
Band, yeah, Stapleton
I'm not sure,
band.
but Jason Isbell.
Yeah,
Most of his band is from here. People you've not heard of, maybe. There was a young lady by the name of Andalyn Parrish, who's a writer in Nashville now. I mentioned earlier Andrew Pope. If you haven't heard him, you need to check some of his music out. He's really good. But gosh, that's to name a few of those. Of course, Norman Blake, Peter Ostrusko, who is in bad health now, but he's played with Dylan in his band. He played with in a band called Aeroplane with Norman. That's a folk type music, bluegrass type stuff. And there's others I can't think of right now.
I was in Nashville with my family. We were up there at Children's Hospital for my son. This is probably about 10 years ago. We were down there in Music Row, and I was coming out of a restaurant or something with the family, and I saw a notebook on the ground right in the middle of the street. And I picked it up, and it was a notebook, and lined notebook. And in it was every phone number of every musical artist, record company, everything in handwriting. I mean, everyone from Garth Brooks to Trisha Yearwood, and then there was RCA and all these numbers. And I felt like I had just come across, and obviously it was someone, I don't know, it was someone coming to Nashville to be a star. I don't know if they obviously knew these people because they had their phone numbers. Yeah, and of course the radio guy, I'm thinking, show prep for the next 3 years. And so I didn't know what to do with it because, and so there's a lot of record companies in and around that area down in Music Row. And so I just took it into the closest one and said, here, someone lost us. I didn't know what else to do. Whether we were only in town for one day, but I remember finding that and I was like, wow, that's amazing because it had phone numbers in it that obviously you couldn't get. This is like 10 years ago. So. Hey, man, I really appreciate you coming in. I could sit here and talk like till noon today. Thank you so much.
I've got lots of stories.
I know you do.
I can get long-winded.
We'll save some because we're gonna get back after it, and I'm looking forward to hearing this new tune, "Easy" from Soul Carnival.
Sure, cool.
Tim's a good friend of mine. Was the reason why we call him Laughing Tim. He's always in a good mood, and he loves you. And thanks to Brandon for getting you in here. But thank you so much for coming in.
Shout out Damon Johnson.
Yes,
I've been fortunate to work with.
Damon's got himself a good little gig going on.
Yeah.
He was on the road. They just announced that Alice Cooper, who he used to play with, is going to be coming to town, I think, sometime in August. And who's he coming with? He's coming with, I can't recall. Anyway, coming with another major artist. They're kind of mashing up their kind of thing. But super good guy, music, and kind of doing his own thing. And so he's like, you know what, I'm tired of paying to play. And so he's doing stuff virtually. And I know he's jonesing again. He loves to play concerts, man.
Oh, yeah.
He loves it.
He is the showman.
Yeah, so
he's really good.
It's really exciting that he's going to be on this new project as well. But David, thank you so much for coming in, brother.
I loved it.
Appreciate you,
Thanks.
Man.